Churchill, the Iron Curtain Speech. Winston Churchill, 1874 to 1965, was one of the most important political figures of the 20th century, not only in Great Britain but throughout the world. Besides being a relevant statesman, he was also a person who reflected on his activities and the historical period in which he lived, wrote many books about personalities and events, and developed his own political thought, though not original, based on the ideas of political democracy and free economy. 75 years ago, on March 5, 1946, he delivered one of the most important speeches of his political life, when he articulated the concept of the Iron Curtain, a speech also known as the Pillars of Peace. His stellar moment came during World War II, when he was Prime Minister of England, and had to lead his country to victory against Adolf Hitler's Germany. His allies in this feat were the United States, first governed by Franklin D. Roosevelt and then by Harry Truman, and the Soviet Union led by Stalin, following the breaking of the alliance between the communist dictator and Hitler. Thus, the three great powers of victory were Churchill, Truman, after Roosevelt's death, and Stalin. However, the hour of peace did not mean the end of problems, but rather the beginning of a new era that few foresaw, which signified the emergence of a postponed problem. In the local arena, in July 1945, Churchill lost the elections in Great Britain to Clement Attlee, who went on to develop a welfare state experiment. Meanwhile, in the international arena, the United States and the Soviet Union had emerged as the two great powers of the post-war world. In this scenario, Winston decided to dedicate himself to writing and giving lectures, though without abandoning practical political activity as one of the leaders of the Conservative Party. One of the most important speeches of that time was the aforementioned Iron Curtain speech, delivered at Westminster College, Fulton, Missouri, on March 5, 1946. On that occasion, Churchill analyzed the world after World War II, appealing with special emphasis to his American allies to achieve the objective of preserving the free world. Today the United States stands at the pinnacle of the Tower of Power. It is a solemn moment for American democracy, for this primacy of power is accompanied by an impressive responsibility for the future, assured the formerly famous British Prime Minister. He referred to one of the dangers threatening the estate, the home, and the common people, that is tyranny. We cannot be blind to the fact that the liberties enjoyed by each citizen throughout the entire British Empire do not exist in a considerable number of countries, some of which are great powers. In these states, common people are controlled by different types of all-encompassing police governments. Then comes the most famous part of his speech. However, it is my duty, because I am sure you want me to tell you things as I see them, to present to you some facts about the current position in Europe. From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an Iron Curtain has descended across the continent. Behind that line lie all the capitals of the ancient states of Central and Eastern Europe. Warsaw, Berlin, Prague, Vienna, Budapest, Belgrade, Bucharest, and Sofia. All these famous cities and their populations and the countries around them are in what I must call the Soviet sphere. and all are subject, in one way or another, not only to Soviet influence but to a very high and, in many cases, increasing measure of control from Moscow, very strong, and in some cases, increasingly strict. Only Athens is free to decide its future in elections under the supervision of the British, Americans, and French. The Polish government, dominated by Russia, has been pushed to make enormous and unjust incursions into Germany, and today the mass expulsion of millions of Germans is taking place on an unimaginable scale and of extreme gravity. Churchill added that the communist parties, which were very small in the eastern states of Europe, have been placed in prominent positions, have been granted power far superior to what they represent, and seek to establish totalitarian control everywhere. Police governments prevail in almost all cases, and for the moment, except in Czechoslovakia, there is no genuine democracy. It was not the first time Churchill had warned of a similar danger, as he himself was careful to recall. The last time I saw all this approaching and proclaimed it to my compatriots and to the world, but no one paid attention. Until 1933 and even 1935, Germany could have been saved from the terrible fate into which it has fallen. And we all could have avoided all the calamities that Hitler allowed to fall upon humanity. Never in history has there been a war so easy to prevent through timely action as the war that has just devastated large areas of the globe. But no one would listen, and the terrible whirlwind engulfed us one after another. It is evident that we must not allow this to happen again. On this occasion, he also noted that war was not imminent. The reactions were immediate, mostly negative in the United States Congress, in the political world, and in the country's press. Some labeled him a warmongering reactionary, and incapable of valuing the sacrifices made by Russia during the last war. As a biographer of the statesman summarizes, even in our day there are still revisionist historians who blame Churchill for starting the Cold War with this speech about the Iron Curtain, omitting the de facto tension that was already occurring. See Andrew Roberts' Churchill. The Biography, Barcelona, Critica, 2019. Stalin himself reacted against what he called Churchill's racist theories, similar to Hitler's, which assumed that only the Anglo-Saxons should rule the world. In reality, the Briton had referred to Anglo-Saxon democracies and did not speak of a specific race. On the other hand, he claimed that during World War II, the Communists had been the most reliable, daring, and selfless fighters against fascism, and for the freedom of peoples, quoted in Jusiem, Hanhimaki and Odarn Westad, The Cold War. A History in Documents and Eyewitness Accounts, Oxford, Oxford University Press, 2004. Despite the controversy, the concept remained established. In fact, from then until 1953, the year of Stalin's death, a series of communist dictatorships were indeed established in Eastern Europe, as explained in Anne Applebaum's excellent book, The Iron Curtain. The Crushing of Eastern Europe 1944 to 1956, Barcelona, Debate, 2014. These dictatorships emerged in the post-war period on the basis of what was supposed to have been the liberation of peoples from Nazism. but in reality had meant a new oppression under the communist regime. For this reason, in practice, Churchill once again demonstrated his capacity for understanding the times, or historical intuition, which allowed him to notice processes that others forgot, omitted, or preferred not to see. With this, he reminds us of the importance of evaluating problems in their real dimension and complexity, without becoming discouraged or simplifying the processes. Only a few months had passed since the end of World War II, and a long and dangerous Cold War was beginning, whose dynamics were marked by the confrontation between communism and Western democracies, separated by an Iron Curtain, by ideologies and power struggles that Churchill warned about on that distant March 5, 1946.